Welcome to my channel, where love crosses stars and mercy defies galaxies. Tonight's story is called, She's Just a Child. The alien mother cried. Then humanity showed what mercy means. It begins not on Earth, but on a shattered moon where war had left the air thin and hearts colder than steel. Amid the ruins, a human commander named Elias stood beside a crashed alien vessel. Smoke rose from the wreckage, and through the broken glass, he saw her. A wounded alien woman holding a trembling child in her arms. Her skin shimmered like pearl under the dim light, and her eyes, bright violet and filled with fear, met his. When soldiers aimed their weapons, she cried out, her voice breaking through the static, "She's just a child. Take me instead." That plea silenced the field. Elias hesitated, his chest tightening. It wasn't the words that stopped him. It was the sound of a mother's love, one that felt painfully human. He ordered the men to lower their weapons. The woman stared at him, stunned. Elias approached slowly, unarmed, his eyes soft despite the dust and blood on his face. "We don't harm children," he said quietly. "Not even in war." She looked at him as if she couldn't believe what she heard. Her kind had always spoken of humans as monsters. Cold, ruthless, merciless. Yet here stood one who offered his hand instead of fire. She hesitated, her arms tightening around the child. The little girl's skin glowed faintly, a sign of her alien lineage, her tiny hands clutching at her mother's chest. "Why?" the alien woman whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Elias smiled faintly. "Because no one should lose what they love." And in that instant, something inside her heart shifted. A feeling both foreign and familiar. Something she thought her kind had forgotten long ago. He took them to his camp, offering warmth and food. The soldiers watched in uneasy silence as this fragile being sat by the fire, her child asleep in her lap. Elias sat across from her, his gaze never leaving her face. She was different, beautiful, fragile, yet powerful in the way she protected her child. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft and trembling. "On my world, mercy is weakness," she said. "You should have let us die." Elias leaned closer, his tone low and gentle. "Then your world never learned what love can do." The flames danced between them, painting her eyes with light, and for the first time since the war began, she smiled. It was faint but real. Something warm began to bloom between them, something neither species had words for. Days passed in the ruins of conflict. The alien mother, named Kalara, grew stronger, her fear melting into trust. Elias would bring her food, teach her to speak his language, laugh at her attempts to mimic his words. She would listen to him at night, watching the stars he called home, her heart tugged by the strange ache that came whenever he looked at her. He was different from the men she'd known, patient, kind, and carrying a sadness behind his calm smile. One night, as thunder rolled across the broken sky, she whispered, "Why risk your life for us?" He looked up at her, his eyes soft with something deeper than duty. "Because mercy isn't weakness, Kalara. It's love refusing to die." The way he said her name made her heart race, and in that silence, a spark of forbidden warmth bloomed in the cold shadows of war. They began to share quiet moments, his hand brushing hers when she passed him water, her laughter breaking through the gloom, their eyes meeting longer each night. Yet love in war was never safe. The command came down. All alien survivors were to be handed over for processing. Kalara knew what that meant. Death. She begged him to flee with her, to save her daughter before it was too late. He stood torn between duty and the woman who had shown him a gentleness he thought he'd forgotten. As the soldiers marched closer, he made his choice. He held Kalara's trembling hands, his voice steady. "Go to the northern ridge at dawn. I'll clear the way." She stared at him, tears glistening, her lips trembling. "If you come, I'll wait for you there," she whispered. He smiled sadly. "Then wait for me." And before she could speak, he kissed her, soft, desperate, and full of everything they couldn't say. At dawn, explosions echoed through the canyon. Smoke filled the air as Kalara ran with her child, her heart pounding, her mind praying he had survived. When she reached the ridge, she turned back one last time, and saw him, standing among the flames, wounded but smiling, waving her forward. She screamed for him to come, but he shook his head, mouthing the words, "Go!" Soldiers surrounded him, but he never looked away from her. Then the sky lit up as his ship exploded, the blast echoing across the sea. Kalara fell to her knees, clutching her daughter, tears of grief and love mixing with the ash. And as the fire faded, the ocean reflected something strange. A beam of golden light rising from the deep, carrying warmth she could still feel on her skin. She closed her eyes, whispering his name, knowing that even in death, he had kept his promise. Years later, Kalara stood beside her grown daughter, watching human ships arrive. Not for war, but for peace. The girl's eyes were bright, her voice strong. "You always said mercy was human," she said softly. Kalara smiled, touching the pendant Elias had given her long ago. "No," she whispered. "Mercy is love, and love belongs to every world." The wind carried the scent of sea and steel, and somewhere far beyond, among the stars, she swore she heard his voice, gentle, warm, and full of hope. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Join me again for more stories of love that breaks boundaries, heals wounds, and reminds us that even across galaxies, mercy is the purest form of love. The night was quiet after the rescue, but the silence felt heavy with unspoken emotions. Kalara sat by the dim fire, her daughter asleep in her arms, her eyes fixed on the human man who had risked everything for strangers. Elias sat across from her, cleaning a cut on his hand, the firelight flickering across his face. She studied him carefully, the way his brow furrowed when he thought, the softness behind his rough exterior. On her planet, men did not show pain or compassion. They obeyed and conquered. Yet this one had stopped a firing squad for a child he did not know. "You could have let us die," she said quietly, her voice almost trembling. "You could have followed your orders." He looked up, his eyes reflecting both weariness and something gentler. "Maybe," he said, "but I'm tired of watching innocence burn." Those words made her chest tighten in a way she didn't understand. He stood and walked closer, kneeling beside her. The warmth of his presence made her pulse quicken. "What's her name?" he asked softly, nodding toward the little one sleeping in her arms. "Sarai," Kalara whispered. "She's all I have." Elias smiled faintly. "She's beautiful. You're both lucky to have each other." She looked down at her daughter, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "We lost everything in the invasion," she said. "Our home, our people, my mate." Her voice broke slightly, and Elias reached out without thinking, his hand hovering before gently touching her shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said. "No one should lose so much." That simple gesture, that quiet sympathy, shattered something inside her walls of fear. She didn't pull away. As the night deepened, the storm outside grew stronger, rain striking the metal of the ruins. Elias built the fire higher, careful not to wake the child. Kalara watched him work, his hands rough yet precise, his movements patient. "You're different from what they said," she murmured. "You're kind. They call you destroyers." He chuckled softly. "Maybe we are, but sometimes we try to build, too." She tilted her head, her lips curving slightly. "And what are you building now?" He met her gaze across the flames, his voice low. "A reason to hope." The air between them changed then, soft, electric, filled with something that neither of them could name. Kalara lowered her eyes, her heart beating faster. It had been years since she'd felt safe near anyone, yet this man's quiet strength made her want to trust again. Elias looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Get some rest. You'll need it when the sun rises." She nodded slowly, but as he turned away, she whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." He froze for a second, then glanced back with a faint smile that lingered even after he walked out into the storm. Long after he was gone, Kalara sat awake, staring into the fire. Every crackle seemed to whisper his name. the memory of his eyes, his voice, his kindness. It stirred something deep and forbidden within her. She touched her shoulder where his hand had rested, feeling warmth that didn't fade. For the first time since the war began, she didn't feel like prey or a survivor. She felt seen. And as she watched the rain fall outside the ruins, she realized she wasn't just thankful for his mercy. She was afraid of how much she wanted to see him again. You said. Morning broke with a soft light that filtered through the cracked metal ceiling, bathing the ruined camp in a faint golden glow. Kalara woke slowly, her daughter still asleep beside her. The child's small fingers curled around the pendant that Elias had given her to wear for safety. The human commander was already awake, sitting on a rock outside the shelter, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He looked tired, yet peaceful, like a man who had seen too much but still refused to surrender to the darkness. Kalara stepped quietly toward him, her bare feet silent against the cold stone. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. Elias turned, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Didn't want to miss the sunrise," he said. "It's the only thing left that feels pure." His words carried a weight she couldn't ignore, and she found herself sitting beside him, closer than she intended, their shoulders nearly touching. For a while they said nothing. The sound of wind through the hollow wreckage filled the silence. Kalara studied his face, the faint stubble on his jaw, the scar near his temple, the quiet strength in his eyes. "You carry many ghosts," she murmured. Elias nodded slowly. "Too many," he said. "War leaves no one untouched. We all lose something." He looked at her then, and the gentleness in his gaze made her heart ache. "What about you?" he asked. "What did you lose, Kalara?" She hesitated, her throat tight. "Everything I was," she whispered. "My world taught me never to feel, never to love, only to serve. But when I held my child as the sky burned, I felt fear, I felt pain. And now, sitting here with you, I feel something I don't understand." He turned fully toward her, his eyes soft and searching. "You don't have to understand it," he said quietly. "You just have to let it exist." His hand brushed against hers, a light, hesitant touch that sent warmth rushing through her veins. She didn't pull away. Their fingers lingered together, a silent connection that said what words couldn't. "On my planet," she whispered. "Touching someone like this means you trust them." Elias smiled faintly. "Then I'm honored." The sincerity in his tone made her breath catch. She looked down at their joined hands, then back at him, her pulse quickening. "You shouldn't trust me," she said. "I was your enemy." He leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "Not anymore." For a moment the war disappeared. There was only the warmth between them, the sound of wind, and the distant hum of a world trying to heal. Kalara looked into his eyes, seeing something she had never seen before in any being, mercy, without judgment. "Why are you like this?" she asked softly. Elias chuckled, looking out toward the sun. "Because I've seen what hate does. I'd rather feel pain for love than peace in emptiness." She felt tears sting her eyes, unexpected and strange. No one had ever spoken to her that way, not even her mate. She wanted to say more, to tell him that his words made her feel alive again, but the sound of distant engines cut through the air. Elias stood immediately, his jaw tightening. "Scouts," he said. "They're looking for survivors." Kalara felt her stomach twist. "They'll kill us if they find me," she whispered. He turned to her, his eyes fierce. "Then they won't." Without another word, he grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the shadows. His touch was firm but gentle, protective in a way that made her heart race. As they hid among the ruins, her body pressed close to his. She could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her chest. And in that moment, despite the danger surrounding them, she realized something terrifying. She no longer feared death. What she feared now was losing him. The sound of engines grew louder, their deep metallic hum vibrating through the broken stone as Elias and Kalara crouched behind a collapsed pillar. His hand stayed on hers, steady and reassuring, while her breath came shallow, her body tense. Through a crack in the ruins, she saw armored patrol ships gliding low, their searchlights slicing through the mist. Elias's voice was a whisper against her ear, calm and firm. "Stay close. Don't move until I say." His breath brushed her skin, sending a strange warmth racing down her spine. She nodded silently, her heart pounding, not just from fear but from the closeness of him. This human who had turned into her only safety, her only light. The searchlights swept over them once, twice, then faded into the distance. Elias exhaled slowly, his grip on her tightening for a brief moment before he let go. "We're safe," he murmured, his voice low and rough. Kalara turned toward him, the tension breaking into a rush of relief. Her hand trembled as she touched his chest, feeling his heart still racing beneath the layers of his uniform. "You risked your life again," she whispered. "For me." Elias looked at her, his expression unreadable, his voice soft. "I couldn't let them take you. Not after everything." She swallowed hard, her eyes searching his. "Why do you care so much?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Because when I look at you, I don't see an enemy. I see someone worth saving." Those words hung between them, heavy and electric. The air felt thicker, the silence sharper. Kalara's gaze dropped to his lips before she caught herself and looked away. But it was too late. He had seen it. The human commander leaned closer, his hand lifting slowly to brush a strand of her silvery hair from her face. His touch lingered against her skin, and the moment stretched into something fragile and dangerous. "Elias," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If they find us together, they'll call it treason." He smiled, a faint, sad smile that reached his eyes. "Then let them. I've already chosen my side." He leaned in, his forehead resting gently against hers, his voice barely a breath. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." Her heart hammered in her chest, her lips parting, every instinct telling her to pull away, but she didn't. Instead, she closed the distance between them. Their lips met, soft, hesitant at first, then deep, desperate, as if both had been holding their breath for a lifetime. The kiss was tender and fierce all at once, filled with everything they had been forbidden to feel. When they finally broke apart, the world seemed quieter, the air warmer, the danger momentarily forgotten. Kalara's fingers traced the line of his jaw, her voice barely a whisper. "On my world, love between species is death." Elias smiled faintly. "Then let's live like we've already died." She stared at him, tears catching the light in her violet eyes, her heart torn between fear and something far stronger. "You'll lose everything," she said softly. "Maybe," he replied, his hand finding hers again. "But if I lose you, I lose what's left of me." Outside, the engines faded completely, leaving only the sound of the wind moving through the ruins. They sat together in silence, their hands intertwined, the warmth between them defying the cold that had ruled their worlds. Kalara rested her head against his shoulder, closing her eyes as he wrapped an arm around her, drawing her close. For the first time since the war began, the stars didn't seem so distant. In that fragile quiet, with his heartbeat against her cheek, she realized something she could never take back. She was in love with a human. The night returned, dark and heavy, but this time the silence between them was no longer filled with fear. It was alive with something deeper, unspoken desire, fragile hope, and the dangerous tenderness of forbidden love. Elias and Kalara sat by a dying fire, their bodies close enough that every breath they took felt shared. The wind outside carried the faint hum of distant patrols, but inside the ruins, time seemed to stand still. Kalara looked at him through the flickering light, her violet eyes shimmering like liquid fire. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "What you did today, defying your own command for me?" He turned to her, his gaze steady and calm. "No," he said. "The only thing I'd regret is not saving you." His words struck her harder than any weapon could. She lowered her gaze, her hands tightening in her lap. "You make it sound so simple," she whispered. "But it's not. You and I, we're not meant to be." Elias leaned closer, his voice soft but certain. Maybe the universe doesn't decide what's meant to be. Maybe we do. She looked up, their faces only inches apart. The heat from the fire and the warmth of his breath mixed together, and suddenly, the air between them felt too small to contain what was happening. "Elias," she whispered, "if they find us." He silenced her with a gentle touch of his finger against her lips. "Let them find ghosts, because right now the world outside doesn't exist." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumb tracing the soft glow of her skin. Her breath trembled, her pulse quickened, and she closed her eyes as his lips met hers again. Slower this time, full of aching emotion. The kiss deepened, carrying everything they couldn't say out loud. The grief, the longing, the fear of tomorrow. She melted into him, her body yielding, her hands gripping his uniform as if anchoring herself to something real in a world built on loss. When they finally broke apart, she rested her forehead against his, her voice barely a whisper. "Why does love hurt like this?" He smiled faintly. "Because it's real." The night stretched on, filled with the soft crackle of fire and the rhythm of their heartbeats. They spoke little, their silence saying more than words ever could. Kalara's fingers brushed against his, tracing the lines of his rough palms, memorizing every detail. "Humans are strange," she said softly. "You destroy everything, yet still know how to love so deeply." Elias chuckled quietly. "Maybe love is the only thing we never learned to destroy." She smiled then, a small, fragile smile that carried more hope than she'd felt in years. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, a storm forming over the scarred horizon. Elias stood and extended his hand. "Come with me," he said. "There's an outpost to the north. If we make it there before dawn, we can disappear." Kalara hesitated, looking toward her sleeping daughter, then back at him. "Will we ever be safe?" she asked. His hand stayed outstretched, his eyes steady. "Maybe not, but we'll be free." She took his hand, her fingers trembling, her heart certain. As they walked into the storm, the first drops of rain fell against their skin, cool and heavy. The lightning above painted the world in flashes of white and blue, and in each one, Kalara saw his face. Strong, unyielding, alive. She pressed closer to him, her voice low against the wind. "If this is wrong," she said, "I don't ever want to be right." Elias looked down at her, his smile faint but full of fire. "Then don't be," he whispered. And together, beneath a sky split by thunder, they vanished into the rain, two souls bound by love, mercy, and the dangerous beauty of defiance. The storm raged through the night as Elias and Kalara ran across the shattered plains, the rain mixing with ash and wind. Every flash of lightning lit her face beside him, wild, breathless, alive. The child was secured against her chest, sleeping through the chaos as if cradled by destiny itself. When they finally reached the ridge overlooking the valley, Elias slowed, scanning the darkness for movement. Below them lay the ruins of the human outpost, silent and cold. "We can rest here," he said softly, his voice barely audible through the rain. Kalara nodded, exhausted but safe for the first time in what felt like forever. He built a small fire from broken metal and old wiring, its orange glow painting her silver skin with warmth. For a long time, neither spoke. The storm eased, and the air filled with the soft hiss of falling rain. Kalara turned to him, her eyes glimmering. "Why did you save me?" she asked at last. Truly, Elias met her gaze, the firelight reflecting in his eyes. "Because mercy makes us human," he said. "And maybe it's the only part of us worth saving." She smiled faintly, her lips trembling as emotion caught in her throat. "You call it mercy," she whispered, "but I think it's love." The words hung in the air, raw and quiet, and when he reached for her, she didn't pull away. His hand slid along her cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of her jaw as he looked into her eyes. "Then love it is," he said softly. She leaned forward, their foreheads touching, their breaths mingling as if the air itself belonged to them. The world outside faded. No more war, no more orders, no more fear. Only two souls who had found something worth defying everything for. When he kissed her again, it was slower, deeper, full of the weight of every moment they had survived. Her body melted into his, the warmth of him grounding her as the storm drifted farther away. "If this is what it means to be human," she whispered against his lips, "then I wish I had been one all along." Elias smiled, his voice a whisper. "You are. More than you know." The fire dimmed, leaving soft light flickering against their skin. Kalara rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For the first time, it didn't sound foreign. Sounded like home. "They'll come for us eventually," she said quietly. "They'll never forgive what we've done." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close. "Then they'll have to catch us first," he murmured. She smiled through her tears, feeling warmth fill every corner of her soul. "And if they do?" Elias pressed his lips to her hair, his voice steady. "Then we'll go down together." Dawn came slow and golden, the clouds parting to reveal a pale blue sky. Kalara stood at the ridge, her daughter waking in her arms, the child's eyes full of wonder. Elias joined her, his hand brushing hers as they watched the light spread across the world. "Do you think we can build something new?" she asked softly. He nodded. "We already have." She turned to him, her eyes full of the love and peace she never thought she'd find. "Then let's build it together," she whispered. As the sun rose higher, the three of them began their walk across the horizon. A human, an alien, and a child born of two worlds. Behind them, the storm cleared completely, leaving the air washed clean. Above, the sky shimmered with soft light, as if the universe itself had paused to watch mercy become love. And though the war would rage elsewhere, in that quiet corner of creation, two hearts had rewritten what it meant to be enemies. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Join me again for more stories of love that crosses galaxies, where even in the darkest corners of war, mercy finds a way to bloom into something eternal.